am Misha of Makai'sMom.com, and welcome to another episode of Our Kijiji, and It's Complicated, where we are going to share another subject that we may or may not disagree on, but we're going to see.
Hello, it's Amber.
Kelly.
Ashron.
And what shall we discuss today?
We're going to discuss. No, I'm kidding.
Representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So this is something I believe we are all, passionate about in different ways. I think as a community, we're passionate about it. The idea came from really building upon the last podcast where Esheron was talking about Emily. So for those who did not see it, who's Emily, Esheron?
That is my son's doll, a black doll, by the way.
Yes. But originally
he wanted a white doll, and I wouldn't let him get it. So the last one we were talking about, I guess we were talking about gentle parenting. I don't know how Emily even came up, but he wanted to get a white doll. And I was like, I mean, you can get a doll, which I think was part of our conversation. Should boys have dolls? You can get a doll, but she got to be black.
Yes. So if you want to get caught up, you have to go watch the previous podcast.
Shameless plug.
Yes. But with that, that's just an interesting concept in terms of the black doll. So there was a black doll experiment, essentially where children were brought into the room, and then they were asked which doll is the good doll and which doll is the bad doll. And there was a black doll and a white doll, and there were, black and white children. And so when the children were asked, well, which one is the good doll? They looked at both dolls, and some, quickly went to the white doll. Others did a back and forth, but the vast majority of the children, not all the children, went to the white doll. So they said the white doll was the good doll, and they said, well, which doll is the bad doll? And everyone chose the black doll. So that's really heartbreaking. And this was several years ago. I want to say like in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. But we fast forward to today. There was a conversation on social media, on Facebook, where a mother and it was a black woman. She's a mother, but then it also appears that she has maybe like a daycare center or after school program, but she did that same test. And so she started with her children, asking like, hey, which doll is the pretty doll? Those were the words that she used. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the children chose the white doll, saying that the white doll was the pretty children. These are, black children. And some of them really were, really going back and forth. So it wasn't, they weren't as quick to say the white doll, but pretty much all of them went to the white doll. And, when asked, and they, talked about the hair and the eyes. And so for me, it really stirred me, because I'm like, all right, we haven't progressed. Like, we're still here. And then it just goes into why representation matters. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to discuss. We know that a lot of times we see in the fashion industry, we see white women and they're the ones, just in terms of like how they're dressing, their body types, their hair, like those are images of beauty. And so why do we need to show up? Like, why as black women, that's when I'm asking myself, like, one of the reasons why we need to show up is because it's not all about, it's not, there's space for us, for one. I'm in my corner of the world. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm really affected as much by colorism until I hear conversations. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like black is beautiful. The darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. It's just like we're beautiful in all our complexities. But it definitely, whatever skin that you're in, whether that is, there's several different hues. Even we all represent several different hues here. But it's like they're all beautiful. But it's like, why don't our children understand that? Are they not seeing us enough? So yeah, what are y'all thoughts?
A lot of thoughts, right? I think about, so there are so many different subtopics to representation matters, and we'll touch on a few today, but in connection with like the doll test and what
our kids. So this is where this is one important aspect for me, and why I was more intentional with Jacqueline and Jordan, with our children, and what I wanted to expose them to, and what I wanted them to center themselves on in terms of what is beautiful, et cetera, et cetera. So I was very intentional to starting out only get Black dolls, not because I have anything against white dolls, but I just did not want them coming up thinking that the white image is what represents beauty.
White is right.
Right. I wanted them to be able to see themselves in these popular items, dolls on TV shows, apparel that depicts different images. Like I wanted them to see that. For Jacqueline, I wanted her to see natural hair. I had a relaxer for as long as I can remember. And when I got pregnant with her, I realized I don't even know what my natural hair looks like. That's just how long I've had a relaxer. So I didn't do the big chop. I just stopped getting a relaxer, and I grew it out and chopped it gradually. But when she started to realize I had a fro, I wanted her to see a fro. I wanted her to see that as beautiful. And so when you brought up the doll test, one of the action items was, hey, do it on your kids and see.
That's right.
And Jacqueline's just interesting. I will say she passed. She passed, like, overwhelmingly. She passed because it resonated for her that these dolls represent me. I think actually she put herself in place of a doll. And so once she did that, that was a game changer. It's like, ain't no way I'm choosing this other doll. I think it was Elsa. Over me. It's like, well, sorry, Elsa, guess you're the bad one. Sorry, I don't really think this, but you're the ugly one, because I'm not going to say I'm ugly, but that's exactly what I wanted.
To choose. Yeah.
Right. I wanted her to have that self-esteem and value herself, and same with Jordan, my oldest daughter. And so in terms of representation, I try to be very intentional in terms of what is being like portrayed to them in different aspects, even with body image. So
yeah. I had a similar experience in terms of the relaxer. My mother did not allow me to have my hair relaxed. I can remember her saying, that means you don't love yourself. If that is what you want to do. So I think she let me do it like when I was maybe 16, which means I was probably junior in high school. So I think for my mom, it was just important that I had a long foundation of not doing that. And so I did get the relaxer. But when I started to have children, I remembered that from my mom and from growing up. And so I stopped relaxing my hair. I flat iron my hair sometimes, but I have 4 daughters, by the way. But somewhere, halfway through, I just started wearing my hair natural. In general, I did not do the big chop like you. I just, let it grow out. And so it's so interesting. My daughters, I didn't do the doll test, but I took my daughter to get her hair washed. And I normally wash their hair, but it's been a long time since they've gotten it done at a salon. And I was like, wash and blow dry. And what that meant to the hairstylist was silk press. My daughter was so impacted by having her hair look like that. She was just so uncomfortable in her own skin having straight hair. And when she got home, all the sisters were like, what happened to you? Why is your hair like that? The next day, she made me wash it. She was like, how do you undo this? And I was like, well, you just have to wet it. And so she was like, I want to wet it. I don't want it to be like this. And so that was my version, I guess, of the doll test, because I didn't ask them that question. But I think it's also so challenging because even though they can have a strong sense of, understanding that Black is beautiful, there's an intellectual, I think, understanding that Black is beautiful. I think that there are so many messages that it's not, that don't come from us. Doesn't matter if we've only given them Black dolls, which I did that too. But, some people like to give them white dolls, and then you got to throw the white dolls away. or keep the white dolls, you know, depending. But those other messages are so, I feel like so much louder sometimes than ours. And what has been difficult for me about being in Winston-Salem, different than me growing up in a Black community in DC, is not having like all the other Blackness around to counter those messages. So I don't know where my kids stand with it. I know they don't want straight hair. I think if they got the doll, they would say, you know, obviously, well, they're teenagers, so they would already know the answer they're supposed to give. But my son is 3. He goes to like an all-white preschool. If I asked him, in spite of the fact of how we all feel, we all got natural hair, we're all black, we blackety black in the house, he might pick the white doll because that's what he's around. Right. So, you know, I don't know. I think it's so hard to combat it.
Yeah, you said it though, but it is a constant combating of those outside messages. And you might even sometimes go into overdrive, right? Trying to, you know, come up against that. But I mean, and it's the same. I mean, Jacqueline, she's not going to turn down straight hair. She wants straight hair. But I think, and Jordan's the same way. She's better now because we dealt with the same thing when she was younger too. She wanted to know why she couldn't get her hair straightened or why her hair wasn't as long as Rebecca's. And so one thing I've told Jacqueline is, well, baby, our hair, it likes to talk to God. It doesn't necessarily want to go down. It likes to, like, you know, be up to the sky. I don't know if she really buys it, but she goes with it. But then she's just like, Mom, she doesn't say these words, but I like the versatility, right? So I'll wear my fro, but I want my hair straightened too, or I want this, or I want that. And I'm okay with that, but it is this constant fight to continue to instill that self-esteem and self-love in them while they're getting everything else that comes from the outside. But again, that's why representation matters. I wouldn't let her watch Barbie for a long time when she was, you know, 4 or 5, because I didn't want her thinking like that's the standard. So I had to try to find stuff. I mean, thank God for like Karma and some of the other kind of Black cartoons that they've come up with now. So I want her to see the gamut, right? I want her to see all of it. I don't want her to have to, I feel like we dealt with it more growing up because we didn't have the options that we have now in terms of media, all forms of media, television, magazine, etc. We had to dig way harder to find, you know, the Nia Longs and Halle Berrys.
Right.
Well, I just want to say one thing before Black women jump on us. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with straight hair and the versatility of Black hair. I think for me, like, I was surprised that she had that reaction. She's 13, so to me, her hair being straight, it didn't bother me. I mean, I was like, this is not really what I asked for. But I was also like, well, it's going to be really easy tomorrow morning. So, you know, I didn't have a problem with it, but it was her own problem with it. But I think for me, I just want to say, like, I think people can do whatever they want with their hair. I think it was just important for me. I always was like, my hair is a political statement for me all the time. And so I wanted, and I want other people, not Black people, when they see me sometimes, I want them to see this. But I wanted them to have a foundation, and then now they can go do whatever they, you know, whatever they want to do. But when they were younger, I wouldn't let them have straight hair because I wasn't sure yet. I think that was the thing. I'm not sure yet why they want this. Do they want this? Because I think that's the other thing. Do they want it because they want to be like somebody else because they think they're not beautiful as they are? And so I don't know what the magic age is, but I felt like, you know, once they get to the age where I know that they are strong in their Black womanhood and their beauty, then do whatever you want to do, because that's also an expression of that beauty. So and thank you for mentioning that, because we are not perm, weave,
bashing, or even like with my hair, just got some of European look. I feel like I'm in between. So do you, as always. The number one thing is, yes, we do encourage you to, feel good about your Blackness and how you're showing up. But I agree in terms of political statement. But I want to, you said something about your son and being in an all-white, in the all-white daycare center. And I think that's another way representation shows up. And I feel like we have, because there are those who are designing those classrooms, at least in the public spaces. And so I know, like, with the work that we're doing, we, with the pre-K priority, we've done some research about like what's important for Black and Latinx families, and for them, representation mattered. Like just understanding like, well, what books are we reading? What pictures are in the classroom? What do you have on your walls? Yes. And so that's something that we're like literally fighting for. And I would say that if we were not at the table, pushing that, then we would continue to do the same thing. Yeah. So it's like, why is it important for us to be, in certain rooms? Misha,
I think it's important because when we talk about the versatility of our hair, the fact that there even has to be a crown act, the fact that if we wear our hair curly, braided,
in a fro,
micro locks.
That's what I was looking for. Sister locks, micro locks. Because, I have a son who is locked, and I transitioned to natural during COVID because of being in corporate in the meetings. However, if we show up as versatile as we are in the spaces that are making these decisions, then it's not so difficult that on the day in between me getting a relaxer and getting relaxed, I probably need to wrap my hair up because you don't want to see it. Or on the natural days before I get it shampooed and retwisted, I need to wrap it up. So why are wraps equivalent to hats, baseball caps? We need to have seats at those tables to have conversations, because Black women have hair days where we transition from one to the other. When we take weave out, when we take our sew-ins out, our hair looks one way, but sometimes we still have to go to work. What does that look like? And it's not unprofessional if we show up in a way that, we cover it in a nice wrap or headband. Or for young men, I just had a conversation this week about young men who were unable to get haircuts for months because some of the people who were helping them get haircuts, they just weren't able to. And so we had conversations, how do we make that happen? Because for us, young boys want their haircut. Yeah. During COVID, I'll never forget, my son was like, is my barber gonna come in any day? Like, at what point can we get this done? And his hair was important because, go back to parenting. I didn't realize how important what his hair meant to him until I made him get a haircut. He had an afro, and I made him get a haircut as punishment. His dad and I both. And he thought he was going to have to get it completely cut off. And so we compromised to, get a high flat top, which was the coolest thing for him. He thought it was ugly, but everybody loved it. And so he grew into it. And then he said, well, I'll keep this and grow this part out and get it locked. That was what prompted the conversation of how important his hair meant to him. And making sure even when he was applying for jobs that wanted you to have a clean cut, he was like, that's not for me because I'm keeping my hair. And I'm like, okay, I got it. And when I think about the color in my hair and how many white women are like, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that, but they say it's not a natural. Why can't we be who we are? Like, why does black or brown or whatever your natural hair color has to be is what makes it professional? So yeah, that's why representation matters, because me being able to show up in certain spaces, how I am, how I look with the colors in my hair, twisted, untwisted, as the older generations would say, fried, dyed, laid to the side, all of those things, we should be able to show up in these spaces and still be taken seriously.
Yeah. What are some ways that, just even beyond aesthetic, but, in terms of that whole decision-making process, like how do we show up, when we know that the decisions that's being made, they may be inequitable or they may have like a negative impact. And, you know, when we say something, and especially if we're the only ones in a room, right? Well, there's two versions. It's like sometimes, you know, it may be one person in a room, in an all white room, and we can hear something and know, like, you know, if we make this decision, it is going to negatively impact, you know, Black people, brown people, poor white people, maybe depending on what it is. And how, you know, being able to persuade or sway, you know, the decision, and like just so that's one. And then sometimes there are other Black people in the room who still, they may, you know, they may feel uncomfortable. And so then, you know, if it's two of you, for instance, and you're the one that's having to say something, and then, you know, the other ones is kind of sitting back or even jump in at times and fight what you're saying because, you know, we want to maintain comfort. I mean, you know, then, because it happens. Like I can tell you some stories. Yeah. So it definitely happens. And so it's just like, this is another reason why representation matters. And to your point, Misha, like we have to be comfortable and understand that. And it is a burden, you know? I don't know anybody feel that burden?
Go.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think it's challenging sometimes in those situations where you may have more than one Black person, and let's say you say something and the other person doesn't. Let's, you know, not where they're going back and forth with you. I think sometimes, in the way I've done it, we've even done this, maybe I shouldn't say, in spaces where we're both in, where I have said, like, Black people on this committee, we're going to call it, do not speak. I'm going to come in here and I'm about to say something and I want to hear from them. This is their opportunity. The ones who are supposed to be allies, this is their opportunity. So, like, don't say anything. I think it's so important for us to have a strategy. Like, when we know that it's going to be, you know, we're going into this situation, like, and this goes to the conversation about when we're in mixed company and at tables with other people. Like, what have we already decided that we want to get out of this and that we're going to say, and who's going to say it? And then we can bring the white people into that too, because sometimes, I think, Kelly, you brought this up too, like there are some things that we need to let white people say to white people. And so in our committee situation, you know, there were some white people too that they knew this meeting is about to be about this. This is what I need y'all to show up and say. You know, so I think that strategy piece is so important too. Now, in a situation where a person is going back and forth with you, Black people, don't do that. Okay? Especially not at the table with the mixed company.
I didn't realize how important strategy was or is until I continue to be in these spaces. Because, well, let me say this. Strategy is important, and strategy has been helpful because it has been over the years burdensome to be the only one. And even if I'm not the only one, I'm the only one saying what everybody else is thinking. And then after the meeting, you pull me to the side and say, thank you for saying it. Right. Sis, bruh, help me out in here. Right. Because now in these other spaces, because while we're having meetings, they're having meetings and they're talking about the one who's always shaking shit up. Yeah. So yes, we need to have a strategy, and we cannot get weary. And I say this all the time because we do get burdened. We do get tired. We cannot get weary in the work, Black or white, because the white people who have the responsibility to talk to their counterparts and colleagues and share and say the things that we're thinking and saying, however, it's not heard the same when it comes out of our mouths, they can revert to being just simply white in their skin when they get tired. We don't have that ability. We're still Black. We're still fighting for things that should have been ours years ago. And yeah, we can't get weary in this work, in these conversations. And so I appreciate somebody coming in with direction saying, not today. Let them say it today, and let's see what the reaction is going to be, because then we have to build a strategy off of that reaction. And I didn't realize how important that was, because then it shares the weight. You know where everybody stands, because everybody is not going to be with you. And again, if you're not with me, tell me later. Don't say it in front of them, because for them it is, oh, we told you.
Hold on, what do you say? What do you mean by that? Because I have, when you
other Black people in the room
going back and forth. So you're saying but what if somebody is pushing back? Like, so if you say something, it's like, well, because it has happened. And I feel like that it may have been unintentional. I feel like sometimes actually, yesterday was a very good example of, of a woman who shared, values that I agree with, as well, in terms of, being a black, being a black mother at times, and, showing up as a black single mother, and then just saying how important it is, to make sure that the father's in their life. And so it's just, it's not just black women. There are several single white women raising children. And, so like, that's like, let's just put that on the table. Secondly, I felt the way that you addressed it, Misha, was very helpful in terms of just speaking out and saying, okay, but why? Like going back to the root cause. So it's not like you were completely you weren't dismissive of what she shared. You are providing clarity, and just saying like, okay, well, let's share the whole story, because a lot of times we like to come in the middle, like, oh, like these black single moms, or we get it on the, none of us, like we're welfare queens. Yes, we're not making money. We're uneducated, which is all married up here. Yeah, nobody's married, which, all lies. But that's a stereotype. Yes. It coming from black people. Yes. So it's just like, but it's like, well, what is the whole story?
May I share how I got there though?
Sure.
Because Aisha Ron was sitting next to me. And so let me talk about how strategy works, because I'm paying attention to, we're speaking about an event that happened in the community, and it was a big event. So I'm looking from the aspect of the details of it. Is it on time? What does it look like for Kelly? Because Kelly was helping to lead it. So, or actually the face of leading it. What does it look like for that? Making sure, listening to Aisha Ron, they're getting the ink on the walls because we want to be able to come back to the church. Yes. Then Aisha Ron is paying attention to the content. In fact, she was like, I'm coming in here to listen because I originally signed up to see what was happening. So she's listening to the content. I hear it, but I'm not listening. She's listening, and so she's commenting. And what she commented on in regards to that statement, I was like, that needs to be said. She was like, oh, no, not right now. We'll talk about it later.
Because I didn't want to, because she said something about legacy and that we need families of, two-parent homes.
Mm-hmm.
And she brought up black single moms. And so the reason I didn't, what I said was, it makes me uncomfortable when people bring up black single moms in mixed company, without the context, because then that gives white people license to go back and say, well, black people said it too. Right. They worried about black single moms too. But I didn't want, because I know who that woman is. I think she's a great person. I have respect for her, and I didn't want to come behind her. And also, I could tell that it was emotionally important for her, what she said, and about legacy. And so I didn't want to come behind her and just say, like,
well, to that point.
But not I think Misha handled it in a great way, though.
Yeah. That's because not only does representation matter, relationships matter.
Yes.
And so while we have relationships with people, we have different relationships with people. And so I felt I could come behind her. Yeah. Because we've had conversations before.
And you know her much better than
that strategy.
However, I wouldn't have been able to come behind her without the content. Right. I needed the perspective that you shared, because you're right. However, I wasn't thinking. I'm listening to her share, and she's speaking of legacy. You heard it with a different ear, and that also, we could not have missed that moment like that. Yeah, I had to say what I said, and that we ain't get to single parent homes by ourselves. Most of our men are locked up. In fact, there was a whole nother conversation of what we talked about was regarding black men being in space, but where are they? Well, it's not that they're not invited. Right. It's if they are invited, do they show up? If they are invited, do they show up? Who do they send to represent them? Because typically it's usually another white colleague. And are they even in spaces of leadership in community where they can be invited? And if not, why? And that's what I wanted to bring out, because my dad was incarcerated for years as a drug addict. Now drug addicts today, because they're usually meth and white,
they have health. It's a health
issue.
And a mental health
issue.
They're
and
not
so
criminals.
We could not miss that moment. So I appreciate Aisha giving me the content, and I could be the voice and speak, because all of this is risky.
Right.
In some capacity. We're all risking something. Yep. It's just a matter of what our risk looks like. And I'm not saying that A. Sharon, because she didn't speak up, that she didn't take a risk on any other level. No. And that's what we have to do in Black communities too, is stop saying the quiet people are the one. Everybody should be out here fighting the power. And I'm going to tell you right now, I ain't boycotting nothing. Because I ain't able to go to jail. I watched the Hound the Hog and how the civil rights and, they didn't want to tell their parents as college students they were going to sit at lunch counters. I ain't going to jail. I'm going to be at the house making y'all apple pies. If you're going to jail, there are all ways that we can support.
Different roles.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's going to play.
That's why the movement.
Huh?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Well, thank you for, and I want to come back to the men thing because I've got some feedback from a male.
No, go ahead. I'll write mine down so we can go there.
Okay, okay. So, because I think it's very important to share. So, speaking to a Black man who was in a room, he deeply appreciated her for sharing that. And I could tell that a lot of the men were clapping their hands.
They were.
Because that's so from him, from his perspective, by having that and he appreciated both sides. And again, the woman who shared, powerful woman. Yes. So so that it's
a both and.
It is a both and that's
absolutely.
the beauty of it, because it's like, and that collaboration, as you shared, like that's key. It's building upon. And so but what she did for him was open up the space to say that we want you here. Like that. And so, because it's like, if we're saying, well, we're the Black men, then the Black men, a lot of times they may feel like, like this may not necessarily be my space. Like if Black women are saying they're not showing up or X, Y, and Z, but she basically said, no, we want you here. And we feel that is important for legacy. And by her sharing that, then that really did something to him. He felt seen. He felt heard. He felt safe.
Appreciated.
And so we, it's like, how are we being intentional about creating those safe spaces? And then he also appreciated the fact that, like, it's like a lot of times we may not be here because of all the stereotypes as well. Like, oh, well, we're not, we're absentee fathers or whatever else. If you say single mother, then the assumption automatically is like, well, where's the dad? Yeah, he's locked up. He's deadbeat and everything. And that's not true. And we know that Black men, there was a Pew Research study that stated that Black men are actually, I can't remember all the measurements, but they were just saying how Black men show up and are more loving towards their children than any other race. And they are. Like, I know amazing single fathers, and and all the times people may not they may not be able to work it out. They may not be on the same page, but they both show up for their children, and so the mother and the father. But he felt that was very important. And then what you shared, it's just like, so one, we are here, but then, and we want legacy too, but then two, what have these systems, what have they done to our families? And why do we just put the blame back on the people and not looking at the situations that caused that to happen in the first place?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
No, I just wanted to get back to, I think it was a comment you made about the different roles. And then using you and A. Sharon as an example about how she gave you the context, but in that moment you were able to be the voice.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to recognize that in this fight, each of us will play different roles.
Yes.
Everybody is not going to be protesting. That's right. Everybody is not going to be sitting in, right? Everybody is not trying to get locked up, right? Some of us need to be at the table. Some of us need to be in, right? We shouldn't all be on the outs, right? And I think sometimes the folks who get in and who get a seat at the table get attacked by the folks who are still out and are for some reason, not for some reason, some actually are, but it's not always the case, but they are categorized as sellouts. Because what you believe should be representation or how they should be representing, they're not doing it. They're doing it a little different. And I think we need to give space for that, and be okay with that. It's all about strategy, right? And understanding the strategy and not be, it doesn't look one way.
That's right.
So I don't mind going and saying, and I think this, so it's two parts to what you're saying. It is a matter of coach me, tell me what it is while I'm in this space that you want me to say so that we can have a conversation. So that's the strategy. The other part is it depends on the table we're talking about, because for Black people, it sometimes feels like it takes us so long to get at certain tables that we end up forgetting.
Some people forget, but sometimes you do forget. Sometimes people think they forgot,
right?
Because
that's true.
Maybe they are not as assertive or aggressive,
or using the same language,
right? Or using the same language.
Right.
Maybe they're like, I'll use myself as an example. I like to consider myself as very tactful, and it is a long range game with me, right? I build up goodwill, and once I've gotten that, now I can like let loose. And so from the outside, it might be like, oh, she done sold out. But on the inside, it's like, no, I'm actually telling them what y'all want me to tell them. I'm using their language, and I'm doing it in a way that it resonates with them, and that they will hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because relationship, relationship matters, and and you built that. Change move at the speed of trust, and so when people. And I said yesterday, like sometimes we have to knock people out of their comfort zone. Like that is a leadership element. But we talking about leadership, when you're showing up in these spaces, then that also means that you have care for everybody who is at that table, whether they agree with you politically or their worldviews or not. So you have to be able, like you can't lead someone that's like trying to tear you down because you're constantly not hearing them, and we may not agree with what they're sharing, but if we can't hear them, but if they just refuse to, they just want to maintain the status quo, then sometimes you got to knock them. But that takes craft, like that's a craft, like that's a skill, and there are different layers to that. So yeah, I don't think that everybody needs to show up and and be the one speaking out, because sometimes you have to know like what are the unintended consequences that come with doing that and calculate those costs.
So go.
I was just gonna say I agree. Like even organizationally, so for me, I work at an organization that's really a white organization, has always been. I just happen to work there now. But because Action for Equity is doing what they're doing, or the Winston-Salem Foundation has already named and defined that outcomes are predicted by race, then I can go back and say that. But if I just come in, I mean, and y'all know me personally, if I just come in with all my personal opinion, they gonna be like, said who? Like they need to know that the funders said it. They need to know that there are other, because my thing is like, do we want to be on the tail end, like just getting this? We should be, at the forefront. So if there's other organizations like Action for Equity and whoever that have kind of busted the door open, that then I can take that and say, look at what's happening in the community. Look at what the community is saying. And we have to be able to be responsive to that. So I think it's just a different approach that I think sometimes people don't recognize. And I think that's like what you're saying. You can't, in every space, I can't just show up like I, would want to and say what I want to say, because people are not ready to hear and receive that. Right. And they go, and it's not about losing my job. It's about losing people.
Right.
Like
what's the end goal?
Exactly.
Am I just here to offend? Am I just here to beat you on top of the head? Or am I actually trying to get something done?
And then sometimes you do need to beat them on top of the head.
Yeah, sometimes you do. But maybe it's you beating them upside the head, and I'm going to be like, and this is why you got beat upside the head.
Right.
Let's talk about it.
And that's the thing. I think this is leading me to think about, when we're thinking about having a seat at the table, like that there are two parallel tables that we need to have going at the same time. And I think what is missing is the Black table, where we're all coming and talking to each other. And so we know, like, I know Amber. So what Amber just said about how she is strategic about what she does, that fits with her personality. I mean, Amber's also an attorney. But I would never think that Amber is, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like soft on race issues. Right. So if I see Amber doing something, then I'm going to know, oh, Amber has a strategy.
But how
around that? Because I know Amber.
That's right.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like, where is the black table where we know each other so that when we see like, oh, Kelly is, I'm making this up. This is not a real scenario. Kelly is out with all these white people, you know.
That's a real scenario.
Well, I'm just imagining what people might say is that, you know, we used to Kelly, you know, action for Ashley, not another brick. Like, where's that, Kelly? Well, sometimes
you better know your history.
Things, you know, you have to work in the, you know,
I mean, white people were part of the movement.
Right, they were. And I'm just saying, I'm just using that. But where people might perceive that, oh, you different.
Right.
Oh, you you're not for us like you were because you're not, the organization has changed. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It was a real grassroots movement.
Right.
But we got to know that, oh, that's because this is this now. And it's still working in the same direction, but it has to look a little bit differently. But I think we need that table of black people where we know each other and where we trust each other so that we're not tearing each other down. And then some people are just...
They can't go.
They're not invited.
So a few things based off of my previous comments and what y'all are saying. One is that... we need to have that table be multi-generational. Because when it comes to me in reference to pre-K, well, my son is far removed from pre-K. Now, I can give you insight and feedback as a black mother. However, we need some people who are actually going through pre-K right now. When it comes to housing, you know, I'm looking for an apartment for my mom, who's now a senior. Well, I got an apartment 3 years ago and the application process is totally different. So things change and evolve. So we have to keep fresh minds who are actually living those things. So when I say people get in and forget, it's also the fact that they just don't have the experience anymore. They don't have a lived experience. So we need people with lived experience who are traditionally not the ones invited to some of these rooms there. I think we're shifting that. In some of the spaces I've been in, we're shifting that. I think a part of what we're experiencing, the trauma resilience, all of those things, that has to come along with the black table. Because when we talk multi-generational, the older generation, they don't want to hear some of the stuff. They feel like they right. And they can be. However, you can be right if we do it this way. Certain things like I heard yesterday in our lifetime, I think it can be well beyond our lifetime if we just sit down and be quiet sometimes. Like our way is not the right way. That's why I'm saying I can go in and talk. I can be a disruptor and I can do all the things, but I don't know everything. So tell me, because what in the spaces that you may not feel comfortable sharing, Sharon, because you have a strategy, I don't want that information that you were thinking, but you didn't say to leave. Like, write that down somewhere because that's going to need to be said somewhere else, and let's have a conversation on when it needs to be said. But I don't want us to continue to miss opportunities to share information and shift the dynamics because we have them now. Like, people are wanting to listen. So we got to show up. And that table is imperative so people know they don't have to assume, because there were a lot of assumptions made around yesterday's event based on the number of white people who were involved. However, we need to have a table to say, you might see this, hold your mute, be quiet, because we getting some work done.
The table is trust. The table is trust and it's relationship.
Trust and relationship.
Because at the end of the day, that, like I said before, and I say it everywhere, like change move at the speed of trust. And so I don't care if you are deep in the grassroots, which we are, or if you are at the grass tops or at the back row level in political, spaces, nothing happens without trust. And that's just the bottom line. Period. And so, and that means in order to build trust, that means you have to have relationship. And so that right there takes time and commitment. And so, and if not, and if you don't have enough of that, there are times where just because I know the type of work that you do, or the way that you do show up in some of the spaces that I may see some people in, then I will at times give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, it based off of what I'm able to see. I may not know everything, but I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, this person may be a part of an organization that is, very mission oriented around things to achieve change. So I may have had conversations with them or been in rooms or maybe even heard and ways that they show up. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt, until I see differently. Now, if I see differently, then I know differently, but I think that it's a matter of being able to, it's a matter of having a little bit of grace, because this stuff is messy. And the other thing I want to say too, though, is that because I do want to name the danger, in all of this, in terms of trust and whatever else. On the other end of that, when somebody is being disruptive, and especially if they are being thoughtful about it, and you are another Black person in the room, and you feel like, okay, wait, we don't want to lose the room, because I've been in those situations. My first thing is not to jump in and bring down the Black person because they were disruptive, because our trauma is real and we have all the reasons in the world to not trust institutions and systems. The data shows it and we've experienced it. However, it is important it's important to step back and to one, acknowledge that, but then two, to make sure that you're not jumping in because you're trying to protect the white people in a space. Because I think a lot of times that's what we see. And hopefully, if you are at that table, and you're representing, the voices, of those who can be negatively impacted by decisions are being made, then that's a skill that you really should build upon. Because whether you are just because you work for that organization does not relieve you from being Black. Right. And so if you're going along with something as a Black person, whether in even if you don't want to, people will associate the fact that you are representing Black people, and then that gives them the okay. So if somebody else is calling it out, then slow down and don't try to make everybody feel, white people feel comfortable when it's about to be harmful.
So I think that's good. If you can, like, what in that situation, what would you do to make sure you keep the room? You keep what the disruptor has said at the forefront, not to protect the white people, but to help
space.
Them get it, right?
Yeah.
So what would you do in that situation?
I think that's where accomplices are important. Like that was funny. That was the word. So there are allies and there are accomplices. At this point in time, if I'm with some white people doing some work, then and especially if it's something if it's close proximity and we're working like like what we did yesterday, then do know that that core circle are accomplices, to the point that's like, listen, I go down, we all going down. Like that is a shared understanding. I only will do things, at that scale with white people that we understand that. And even with that, they still have the privilege. Like, I'm going to walk away Black, even if I do go down, you're going to walk away white, even though you go down. Your bounce back is going to be a lot easier than mine. I know all of this, and I make sure that they know that too. Like, I don't have any problem saying that. But I do think that, that is why I believe in multiracial organizing. I don't believe we'll get things done without it. I need accomplices. I don't need to carry the burden at the table alone and for doing what's right. And we can.
We're not there yet. We want to be, but unfortunately, we're not there yet.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we need to, and so even with them, it's just strategizing, and that strategy. Because I don't want to sound all technical, but I think with the strategy, it is taking care of each other. Just knowing like we're about to do some hard things that people do not understand in this room, and I understand it. And I want to make sure that you're good. Yep. So if you're saying this and it's the right thing, then I have your back. So for people that's watching, this is not about behavior. Well, it is about behavior. It's not about you as a person if you're been in these spaces. But I think that having being able to take care of yourself, for us to take care of each other as Black people, and then for white people that are saying that they're showing up to do this work, then they have an obligation to take care of us as well, you know, and we need to be on the same page, because that's essential. There is a lot, you know, that we have to put out. So it's not only the job, you know, at hand, it's also like it's our livelihood as well. But if we're, you know, we know the burden of these decisions that are being made, then we have to be able to show up. And what do you think? Just because I know you're more coming like from a corporate experience.
No, I agree with everything that you're saying. I'm totally on the same page with you about the fact that we can't do it alone. Yeah. And I'm wrestling with, do I even want to do it alone? But maybe that gets me way too into my kumbaya bag. But I recognize the different struggles that we've gone through, that we continue to go through, and why it is an area with a lot of tension. Yeah. I think we're probably running up on time, but I was sitting here thinking if we needed to clarify the point that you, Sharon, was making about, and you too, Kelly, about being in those rooms and the impact of you coming up against the vocal Black person in the room in a way that now there is conflict in mixed company. And what is that impact in that room? And if we're supposed to be aligned on what the ultimate goal is, you've taken us a few steps back, probably by not being aligned, by disagreeing, by coming up against that person in that room. Yeah. And that's why hold it. Yeah. Right. I don't know, what other advice would you give for that? And how to navigate in that space. So that we're not moving backwards when we're trying to make progress. Right. I'm trying to capture one of the points you were trying to make, and I don't know if you feel like we brought it home.
I will speak to white people.
Speaking of in mixed company.
Okay.
I will speak to white people in that if you see that happen, don't take it as a checkbox in one way or the other for whatever it is you're thinking. Take it as y'all have disagreements in your community. And right now we're having a disagreement. And whatever the solution is when we come back, y'all need to stand with us on that.
Yeah.
We're not a monolith.
We're not a monolith.
That's what I was going to say. What's challenging to me is like we don't have to agree on everything. Like, even though I don't like to talk about diversity a lot, but diversity is important. And we have like even the four of us. I mean, there's a lot of things that we probably don't agree on. So I don't want to make it seem like we have to agree on everything. But I also think if I'm in a room with Misha and she says something that I don't agree with, I'm not going to say anything about that in the room. And I think that also is about the trust and whatever. And also because I know where Misha is coming from, and I know that we are aligned on where we're trying to get, but we have a different lived experience. Right. I mean, Misha sits on my board, and so there are some times where I'm like, whoo, okay. Well, she said what she said.
She dropping
but
bombs?
I don't feel like I feel like, well, it is what it is. Like that is, and even though I don't share that experience, I feel like it is what it is, and y'all needed to hear that. Y'all colleagues, y'all board members together. So I don't need to clean it up. I don't need, you know what I mean? Yeah. Even if it's not something that I would have thought to say. Right. Or I mean, Misha has gathered some people.
What is she talking about?
So, but I'm not going to go. But what I'm very intentional to not do is ever go behind what Misha said and try to make them feel better. Well, she might have said that. And I mean, this may be getting too much, but I've gotten complaints about things Misha has said, and she knows this. And I've just been like, okay. Okay. All right, great. And I don't even really remember the whole thing. And I was just like, well, I'm sure she ain't mean it like that. I'm sure that's not what she meant to say. Yeah. I'm always going to stick up for what the Black person said if I know we're aligned and if I know where their intentions are. Now, if it is the,
And it's so general.
Thing.
And
I'm not going
fact
to.
by fact,
but
for sure.
I'm never going to like, in the moment, in the meeting. And I think even if it's somebody that I don't know them, but if they are sharing something that I know comes from like some pain that they have experienced or something, I feel like, hey, well, that's what y'all need to hear right now.
Right.
I guess.
Right.
But I think it's just as important what we do as what we don't do.
For sure.
Right. That's
like,
good.
let's do not follow that up. Like Kelly said, by trying to make white people feel comfortable. I never want to feel like I'm going to like tear down another black person, and specifically a black woman. But black men, I'm going to think about that too, based on what that man said. I'm going to try to think about how we can make black men feel safe too. But I never want to tear down another black woman in front of white people. If Misha did something that I was like, this is too much, I would go to Misha.
Correct.
So this one part. So I agree on principle, in terms of what you're saying. I do think that, like if we're making a vote, right? If we're making a vote and this is about to be set in stone, and I know that this is something that will have an impact, a systemic impact. Then honestly, for me, it's about what is the right thing that needs to happen. I am not, and some people do not agree with this, and I'm fine. I am perfectly fine. But I believe I will push back on. So let me give an example. There are some black people that will show up and they will say, well, parents are the reason why things, all the conditions, housing, food, we don't have affordable housing because of black parents don't show up. We don't have food in our neighborhoods because black parents don't show up. Yeah, children are this, that, because of black children. No, you're starting in the middle. Huh?
Do they say it like that?
No, they don't say it like that. That's how I hear it. That's how I hear it in my head. But it's just like, we're here to talk about what needs to happen to move our community forward. And I get, like we want our whole community to be strong and to show up like we do, because we feel that we got it right. But we're starting in the middle. You're starting in the middle. You're not looking at, well, why? How many jobs is that mother working? Maybe that mother is so bent out of shape because she does not have a village. And y'all know how we do. It's like, don't go out here telling people what's going on in this house because at one point when people did try to cry out for help, then their children were getting taken for them. Right. So there's some real consequences. So we start in the middle. So because I've been in rooms where that has happened and I had to push back.
And this is the mixed
This is mixed company. Okay. I'm showing up for black children and black families, period. And so even if you are of the same hue,
and in that case, I got to challenge you.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge you.
And I think that's the thing. Like where there's alignment or where I know where we're going, I'm not going to challenge you. But I think, I mean, Kelly, we've had this experience in a meeting and someone said something and I was like, okay, because there is a level of personal development and growth that some people need to have, and education about systems, about systemic issues, all that. And I was like, well, Kelly, when are we going to like educate the group about all that stuff? Because otherwise the solutions that black people will give come through a white lens and framework because they don't have the proper analysis. Right. But I would not say that in the meeting.
Please do.
No, I'm not saying not to challenge you. No, but there was someone who shared what, like what youth had said they wanted to do to improve something. And it was all about, it was just through a lens that didn't have the proper analysis. Now, I wouldn't share that. But because you were running, because it was a group that you were running, I shared that with you to say, like, I think we got to bring that analysis to people when we're going to have them in these spaces to do that.
Right.
But I think in the case, single moms and black parents don't care. Those are like two of my trigger things. So I think if somebody came out with black parents don't care, I probably wouldn't have done it. If we're doing a vote, I'm a vote how we should vote. But I probably, my approach would probably be to address it, but in a very soft way. Like, you know, there are multiple sides to everything. And sometimes, and how I have addressed the thing with Black parents, because that has come up a lot in my work, is talking about myself. And I'll say, you know, people say that about parents a lot, but as a parent of 5 children, I'm not reading to my kids at night like you know, we say I should. I don't want to do after school stuff. I can't go to somewhere at 5:30. So that's how I've dealt when people say it, is to put it on me. So it doesn't feel like I'm coming out against you, but also for them to think too, well, what the hell am I doing as a Black parent? Am I coming to all the things? Because the expectations of parents are ridiculous. Yeah. And also in my work, because it's around reading, and a lot of people say that, well, the kids can't read because the parents didn't reach them. Well, that's not how learning to read works.
Right. That's good. Because you're showing up as a Black mother and, you know, leading this organization. And I think that that's important, because sometimes we take off the fact that we're a Black person. So it's like, okay, we're just showing up, and then we will leave our lived experience behind because it hasn't been safe for us to do that.
Safety. Representation matters. Relationships matter. And to Aisharon's point about the softness in her voice or how she responds to things, I had to learn that, because again, if you don't have the relationship, if you don't have the separate conversations in the table, you may think the person is not addressing, or they feel they can't address, which is why I come to Aisharon and be like, what is you need me to say? How can we support you? Do you feel comfortable with us saying this? Because until we get to that point, again, we're all risking something, and we got to make sure the risk aligns with whatever it is we are trying to accomplish, the end result. So I'm saying that also to say, if I didn't know, I would have taken that softness for weakness, or that the person is not showing up how they're supposed to. So we have to continue to talk to each other, communicate with one another, and be open to being challenged. And expressing that challenge and how that challenge makes you feel in a timely manner. Don't be walking around here holding on to stuff, and then by the time you come back, everybody thinks everything is all good and you still got a grudge going on. Like, we have to shift the dynamics in this community, because that's the only way we're going to get this work done. So any last thoughts y'all want to share before we, what the man do? Wrap this up.
I don't know. This one might be worth a part 2, because I feel like there's so much more.
Oh, listen,
to be said.
I know.
Those are my closing thoughts.
If we need a part 2, like you said, Misha, that we need to
2,
take
3, 4.
one more of these, then that makes the topic selection easy, because we have a short time frame. So I'm a second. What Amber said.
We just talked about having a conversation about the vote before we got to the vote. Y'all voting on screen. What example are we?
Well, we are just showing up as who we are, right? This is unscripted and organic, the way you wanted it to be.
True.
What's not complicated? Because y'all making this real complicated.
Okay, so what's not complicated? I had prepared my what's not complicated ahead of time, because I thought this was the last episode. So my first one was going to be, thank you, Misha, for creating this space for us to do this. Because, you know, it is because of your work with our Kijiji that we're even here. So that was my first, it's not that complicated, but I'm going to save it, since this might not be the last one.
Because I thought,
was
hoping this was the last one.
No, you was not. No, you were not.
With them.
Don't believe her.
She loves us.
Yeah, she does.
But my it's not complicated for this one is, let's build the table, the other table, the parallel table for the Black people, where we can build the relationships and the trust, where we know each other, and the multi-generational table, although I do have some thoughts about that, but those are complicated, so I'm not going to share it now. But let's build the table, or a couple tables, for the Black people.
Skip me. Okay, come back to me last.
Oh, okay. So what is not complicated? Keeping with the theme. I don't think this is complicated, but recognize the various roles. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to expound.
I was getting ready to
That might
say
be a little complicated.
That's not. Okay. The point is, recognize that there are various roles. How about that? Is that better?
Okay.
Is there? Okay. That's not complicated.
Kelly wants you to expound, but okay.
I can. One more time.
like all of this, for whatever reason, is complicated. So that's why it's very difficult for me to think of something that's not complicated about it. So I'll just say this. What's not complicated is that, the majority of us, if I would say a good 98% of us, are just trying to do our best.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not complicated. Mm-hmm. So, if we can get to a place where our first reaction is a bit of grace, let's try that.
I have to share this before I share what's not complicated, because you triggered it before and I forgot. I love how we've had conversations. I've had it with y'all, and I've had it with a couple other people who say, well, I stopped going or I stopped doing this because of how they treated you. I love that, because I feel so supported in spaces where, and for so many years, I didn't feel supported. However, I want to make sure that if people are willing to do that, people are willing to risk relationships and not going to certain things and being in spaces because of what you say, that you're coming from a genuine place and saying it. And that we need to have conversations about what any of us are saying about our experiences, so that you can say, well, I didn't have that experience, and not it not be taken as discounting how I'm feeling. But let's have a conversation in big picture terms, because nowadays us not showing up to things can be very detrimental to a larger picture. So I love that support. I just want to make sure it's done in the right way. So that means we have to be honest in sharing our experiences, and then we have to be good listeners in other people sharing their experiences, so we can make an informed decision on how we're showing up and when we need to show up. But because I'm me, I got 5 things.
5 things that are not complicated.
Wow. First of all, pipe down.
I thought that was it.
No.
Wow.
They all are coming from my earbobs.
This is, just
they're all coming from my
license
earbobs,
because this is your Arkajiji.
These. So do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That came from grad school. Black boys deserve to grow up too. And I'll add to say, in peace. Black mothers matter too. And love black people's cultures like you love, love black people like you love black culture. Open your mind before you open your mouth. And I don't care how you were raised. Unlearn that shit.
That was the one.
Yes.
Or the 2. I like both.
That was your final episode.
I know.
I got some more. Okay, you're going to have to come with some more.
Sheesh.
All right, y'all. Well, thank y'all. Thank you for viewing. If you want to communicate with us, as I'm hoping y'all will, instead of talking amongst yourselves, send us a message, comment below the video, and we'll get back to you. One of us will. I don't know if you'll like how the response, what the response will be, but we'll get back to you. As always, be vigilant, be careful. I pray you continue to be well. The only constant in life is change. In a perfect world, we'd be able to adjust accordingly. But in this world, I ask you to not be afraid as you ask for help while you adjust. Because after all, this is our Kijiji, for us, by us, to help us be our best us. Until next time.